Hello, welcome to the first lecture in the Programming and Operations unit. And today we're going to start with commercial broadcast stations. Now, the FCC defines a commercial broadcast station as any entity that holds a federal license for a specific community. Commercial broadcast stations are also defined as those that transmit programs over the air. Okay, right now we're just talking about broadcast stations. And they carry commercial messages. Okay, some examples are, of course, Fox 4, NBC 5, WFAA in Dallas, Channel 11, the CBS affiliate. Some of the functions of local stations or station groups are administrative, technical, programming, promotion. General and administrative functions are services that any business is going to need to maintain, such as HR, accounting, housekeeping, and purchasing. Those aren't exclusive to, of course, broadcast industry. Then you have technical functions, which are much more broadcast specific. They center on transmitter operations, maintenance of the equipment, and these kind of duties are usually fall to an engineer and his or her team. Then you have programming functions, which involve planning and implementation of programs. And of course, promotion, which is also known as creative services or marketing. And that makes potential audiences and advertisers aware of the station. And also, very important for a station function is news. And we'll talk more about news a little bit later. Now, station groups operate on the economics of scale, or the idea that large businesses can usually be more efficient than a small business. The most powerful group owners are the networks of their owned and operated stations, which are licensed in the country's biggest broadcast markets. So, some station groups, an example of a station group is BELO, which owns Channel 8 and many other channels and mediums in Dallas. BELO is a large corporation that owns several stations throughout the United States. Now, going back to the owned and operated, those are owned specifically by the networks. NBC owns one, and CBS actually owns one there in Dallas. Looking at FCC regulation, the FCC limits the number of stations that any one owner can have, although there has been kind of a trend in recent years towards deregulation or a loosening of government control on the ownership. The Telecom Act of 1996 actually removed all national limits on the number of TV stations that a company can own, but there's still a limit on the percentage of TV households that any one group owner can cover. Okay, so they can own as many TV stations as they want, as long as they don't reach more than 39%, and I don't know why they came up with that arbitrary percentage. As long as they don't reach more than 39% of TV households, the group owner is safe. Okay. Now in radio broadcasting, any owner can hold up to 8 stations in a local market, provided that there are at least 45 or more existing stations in the market. Some critics say that deregulation is needed, so basically less FCC involvement in ownership rules is what we're talking about when we say deregulation. And some say that deregulation is needed to make TV and radio more competitive with other mediums like cable, the internet, satellite distribution. And on the other hand, if there is less deregulation, then some people fear that there is a loss of localism or the ability of local entities to put localized content, especially news, on the local affiliates. Let's take a look a little bit more about networks versus affiliates. The term television network means one of the major national commercial networks to most people. But the fact is that there's more than just those big three that we kind of always hear about, or the big four now. I would say that Fox has definitely kind of solidified its position as a major network since the 90s. There are also, of course, you've heard of the CW. You may have heard of Ion Television. It used to be Pax Television. There's Telemundo, Univision, and My Network TV are some of the other examples of national networks. Each of these networks are made up of what is known as affiliates, and that's what most stations are. They're network affiliates. These affiliates have a contract with a specific network to deliver network programming and provide ad time. ABC, of course, is an example, CBS, NBC, everybody's heard of these. The duration of most network affiliation contracts ranges from about 3 to 10 years. The conventional contract says that affiliates receive network programming for free in exchange for providing airtime for network commercials. And then affiliates also can receive adjacencies, which refers to slots for local commercials in a network program. And that is a very important source of revenue for the local affiliates. And there we're talking about affiliation contracts. Again, those are between the affiliates and the networks to provide programming space, basically, for national programs, which are free to the stations. Looking at compensation and clearance when you're talking about the affiliate network relationship. Local affiliates can also make money from these compensation agreements where they're paid from the national networks in return for the use of their airtime. This usually comprises around maybe 5% of a particular station's revenue. But the amount of network compensation varies from station to station, and networks are trying to cut more and more back on these compensation agreements. Networks are being squeezed on all sides financially, in addition to the affiliates. But networks are finding that they have other distribution channels open to them, whereas the affiliates depend more on the national networks for their programming. So there's kind of a tug of war that's been going since the late 80s, and a constant strain. And the relationship between affiliates and their national networks is starting to sour, or it has been souring for quite some time, and it's getting more and more acrimonious. Now, there are some instances of reverse compensation where an affiliate, a local affiliate, will actually be required to pay networks for shows. I think the general trend is more towards the regular form of compensation where the network pays the affiliate. Now, clearance. When we talk about clearance, we're talking about a term or a concept that refers to an affiliate's contractual agreement to keep its program schedule clear for network programming. But technically, affiliates do have the right to refuse clearance to a network program. However, really about 90% of programs, national programs, are cleared by the local affiliates. Although the term television network means one of the major national commercial networks to most people, the fact is we do have other TV networks in operation. Most of them are UHF stations, which we talked about UHF in the last unit. Those are lower powered broadcast stations, but now they have a greater ability to compete because cable has kind of enabled them to reach bigger audiences. So although most independents don't necessarily belong to a network in the technical sense, more and more you are seeing that cable has not only helped UHF stations to compete, but there are relatively few true independents anymore. Many of them have gone to these other national networks such as the CW or My Network Television. When you talk about network regulation, well, in actuality, the FCC doesn't really regulate networks directly. They regulate through local affiliates because the local affiliate, remember, is what actually holds the FCC license. So local affiliates stations are directly regulated by the FCC, and kind of through the affiliates, the FCC can kind of penalize networks.